been a busy day of transfer news following Craig Hope's great exclusive this morning on the Daily Mail that Alexander Isak had informed Newcastle that he wanted to explore his options this summer. Obviously, the Isak saga has been ongoing for the past sort of 10 days or so when Liverpool approached Newcastle to register their interest in the Swede. Although at the time, the Reds were firmly told that Isak wasn't available. And of course, Liverpool have gone on to sign Gyokeres from Eintracht Frankfurt. He actually was pictured arriving in training with his teammates in Hong Kong this afternoon. But the Isak story has really developed today because it's now looking likely that there is a firm chance he could depart Newcastle. Obviously, they don't want to sell. But in the past few hours, I've been making checks on some of the clubs that potentially might also be interested in Isak, although the majority of those have distanced themselves from the prospect of making a bid. Chelsea, one of them. Chelsea, of course, made an inquiry for Isak last summer. However, they have since signed João Pedro and Liam Delap, and the noise from Stamford Bridge is that they won't be moving for Isak despite being a firm admirer of the player. I mentioned in a previous video, but I wanted to make it clear that Chelsea were also pouring cold water on links to João Pedro earlier in the window, and they of course moved to sign the Brazilian from Brighton. So I would operate with a sense of caution, but I think the fact that they have already signed Delap and Pedro this window, and they also have Nicholas Jackson, suggests that, you know, it really is unlikely to see them making a move. Because those two signings and acquisitions really do look like signings that will take the team on. And at this moment in time, Chelsea are prioritising the arrivals of Xavi Simons and Jarell Hato from RB Leipzig and Ajax, respectively. Good progress is being made on both of those deals. Hato has already agreed personal terms with Chelsea because he wants to join the club. There's ongoing contact with Ajax after an opening bid was submitted yesterday, while Chelsea have now opened formal talks with Leipzig for Simons, and he has already indicated that Chelsea would be his preference if he was to leave RB Leipzig. Manchester United have also ruled out a move for Isak, although that is hardly surprising news given that it was just a matter of months ago Sir Jim Ratcliffe was saying that the club was close to going bankrupt, and of course since then Matthias Cunha and Brian Mbeumo have also signed on the dotted line at Old Trafford for big money deals. I do think United are obviously trying to bring in a striker, but they're under real financial pressure at the moment. They need to raise cash to fund moves, and you know ultimately Isak would be out of their price range anyway. So that hands Liverpool virtually a clear run at Isak. But I wanted to touch on Arsenal because, of course, the timing of this situation has come at a bad time, really, because I think if Isak had opened the door to a Newcastle exit at the start of the summer, there is a firm chance that Arsenal really would have pushed forward and tried to explore a move. Obviously, at the moment, Victor Gyokeres is very far down the line. He's on course to become an Arsenal player in the coming days. I've been reluctant to do a video since my last one because I've just been waiting for that final confirmation from either Arsenal or Sporting that the deal was all done and that there's been authorisation for Gyokeres to travel and do his medical, but I still haven't received that yet. Again, at time of uploading, there is a chance that could materialise. But when those initial reports broke a couple of days ago that basically it was all done, my information was that it was still ongoing, which is, of course, you know, really bad news from an Arsenal perspective if you're a fan of the club, because it has rumbled on for far too long. But a very complex deal, and the two clubs have been going through the required paperwork on both fronts so that they can get everything in place on a legal side before Gyokeres travels and does his medical. There have been suggestions that Gyokeres could go straight to Singapore and do his medical. My information was always that he would probably go to London. That remains the case. Obviously, there was a breakthrough in talks earlier in the week on Tuesday, but the clubs have just been getting everything prepared so that Gyokeres can come and do his medical and then join up with the squad in Asia, which remains the absolute priority if it's logistically possible. Obviously, Arsenal play Newcastle on Sunday in the friendly, and there's optimism that that would be the target for Gyokeres to be involved in terms of getting him over there. But obviously the clock is ticking, and there have been suggestions today as well that Gyokeres will travel tomorrow for a medical. There's been suggestions he's already in London. I don't have any information on that, unfortunately, because I have made checks and I've not received responses. So I've been reluctant to say and put out there that he's been authorised to travel for a medical, because from my perspective, I don't believe that that has been authorised just yet. But it's not to say it won't happen, because the deal is virtually done. All the remaining differences have been resolved between the clubs, and they've now had sets of lawyers going through the documentation that needs to be exchanged between the parties. Sporting are likely to release a press release when it's finally confirmed. They usually publish it on their website and probably on their social media channels as well, which will confirm all the important financial details of the agreement with Arsenal for Gyokeres. They've done it in March, I believe, for Dario Isugo, or January it might have been, when he arrived. He arrived at Chelsea this summer, but he was on loan at Las Palmas, and the club struck an agreement. And Isugo moved to Chelsea this summer. Or Chelsea also wrapped up a deal for Giovanni Quenda as well, who would join next summer. But Sporting, because they're have an affiliation to the stock exchange, they're obliged to publish these kind of information and facts, because they have to put it into the public domain so that all their shareholders have access to the information. But there's really great transparency. It's good for journalists because you can see all the final details, all the numbers in terms of the structure of the add-ons, etc. Should be published when that agreement has been finalised. So I'm just waiting for that. It could arrive at any minute. I've kind of been on standby waiting for that over the past couple of days, but it just hasn't happened as quickly as what everyone had hoped. Obviously, the Mosquera deal at this moment in time still hasn't been announced. I was told on Tuesday that it was likely expected in the next 24 hours, but it still didn't arrive. I didn't publish that anywhere, thankfully, because it still would have made me look like I was publishing inaccurate information. But I was told on Tuesday it was expected in the next 24 hours. So I'm not sure what's going on. I'm sure you've seen, but Mosquera is now in Singapore. He's been pictured at a shopping mall with Arsenal Spanish players, David Raya, Martin Zubimendi. So the deal is already done. Not expected to be any last minute hitches. It's just a case of when the clubs want to announce it. All the media stuff was done last week at London Colney. So Mosquera is on board, and the optimism is Gyokeres is next. So for anyone wondering whether Arsenal could launch a late move for Isak, I mean, I would say highly, highly unlikely at this stage when they've worked so hard to get the agreement in place with Sporting for Gyokeres. So if they were to somehow rip up that agreement and go for Isak, it would be, an enormous, incredible twist. But it's just not likely at this stage. Obviously, it's so far down the line. And as I said, I'm expecting Gyokeres to undergo his medical finally in the coming days and complete that switch. He's been waiting so long to get it over the line. We've been talking about it for weeks and weeks. There have been so many twists and turns. But although Arsenal have huge admiration for Isak, they'll be absolutely satisfied that Gyokeres is the right man for the club. Obviously, they've had to make a number of other signings throughout the window as well. So ultimately, Isak is worth, will probably be worth near on double what Arsenal pay for Gyokeres. So it's allowed them to bring other players in as well. I think, if Isak was available at the start of the window, there's a chance we might have seen a slightly different approach to Arsenal's business. Would they have maybe stuck with Saka and Nwaneri as options on the right instead of bringing in Noni Madueke? I mean, Arsenal will probably say no, they definitely wanted to do that deal. But maybe Isak would have been a top option, because make no mistake, earlier in the year, when we approached the latter stages of the season, he was very much considered top of the radar for Arsenal, but it became clear once Newcastle secured Champions League qualification that most clubs, including Liverpool, didn't feel he would be attainable this summer. It's only the fact that Liverpool have made that approach and it's unsettled Isak that actually he could now leave the club. So I think Arsenal will be very satisfied that they've brought in Gyokeres, obviously, providing he passes his medical. And he looks a great signing for the club. And I know there's been so much excitement amongst the fan base. We saw the fans doing the mask celebration in Singapore yesterday. So I don't think there'll be any real dissatisfaction because Gyokeres has made such a push to join the club. He wants to be on board. And I think that goes a long way. And ultimately, he's a goal-scoring machine. So two Swedes potentially could be at the centre of the title race next season, providing that Isak does, and there are massive hurdles to clear, does sign for Liverpool. But I still think, as I said, Arsenal will not be done in the market once Gyokeres arrives because they're still keen on strengthening that left-hand side. There was a lot of criticism yesterday for the fact that Reiss Nelson looked probably Arsenal's brightest spark on the left wing, given he's been away on loan and also suffered a serious hamstring injury and had to undergo surgery. It's not really a great reflection of Gabriel Martinelli and Leandro Trossard. I know there's some concern amongst the fan base that maybe Martinelli has plateaued a little bit because there was a few seasons, particularly the 2022-23 season where Martinelli was really in top gear. I think he scored 15 Premier League goals. But I don't know, he's not quite hit the heights that were expected of him. There was some loose inquiries from Bayern Munich, Barcelona, Saudi Arabia this summer, but nothing really concrete. And Arteta wants to keep him. I think Trossard is still a situation that could develop, but at the moment, there's no real clear, concrete suggestion he's imminently going to depart. So I think it will depend on what happens with how hard Arsenal are willing to push for another left winger. Obviously, Eze, Rodrigo are the two names that are constantly being touted. Whether they're actually achievable, we don't know yet. It might depend on sales. But I do still expect Arsenal to bring in another attacking player. And that would be a real statement addition on top of the ones that they've already brought in. Just wanted to touch on Benjamin Sesko as well because he's emerging as a clear option for Newcastle in amid the possibility that Isak could leave. I think Newcastle need to start moving really and deciding whether they want to line up other options as part of this sort of crazy striker carousel really, because obviously Arsenal looked at Sesko. He's been linked with Manchester United. Chelsea have looked in the past, but Sesko would be one of the priorities if Isak was to leave this summer. There was a stipulation over the fee because Arsenal felt he was probably valued a little bit too highly by Leipzig, who need to raise money because they haven't qualified for Europe, as we've touched on in previous videos. Whether Sesko would be open to a move to Newcastle, I don't know, but it's long-standing interest. And he would probably be able to leave Leipzig now that the window's gone on a little bit and they haven't really raised much money through sales for a figure between 60 million and 75 million. I think with add-ons, it'd be probably closer to 70 million, but Sesko's a really interesting profile. Obviously, doesn't have the pace of Isak, but he's very strong and tall. Powerful in the box, good in the air, can hold the ball up. So I can see why Newcastle might be looking at him as the heir to Isak's throne. Obviously, there is ongoing interest in Johan Wissa. Fresh talks taking place today with Brentford after the £25 million bid was rejected. They're looking up to... Brentford would be looking for at least 40 million to consider a sale. But even then, I still think they might try and push a little bit higher, knowing that Newcastle could have cash to burn in the event Isak departs. And it's important to say as well, I mean, I would be absolutely stunned if Liverpool were able to finance an immediate bid for Isak without sales, because they've spent just under 300 million already this summer following the arrival of Hugo Ekitike. But the crucial factor is they've got a number of players that they could sell to generate cash. So you've got Darwin Núñez, who is, of course, still likely to depart this summer, despite the fact that he's sort of emerged as a key figure really in pre-season, scoring 3 against Stoke and 1 against Preston. Obviously, the Napoli move is off, but Luis Diaz as well is now looking like a firm departure, really. Bayern Munich stepping up their interest. I think Liverpool have intimated that they're not going to renew his deal at this moment in time. He's 28. They could still generate a big fee for Diaz. Bayern already had 1 bid rejected and are expected to up their offer as well. So I think the Isak bid will depend on departures at Liverpool. Harvey Elliott is another one, rated about £40 million, has been speaking today about his future and says that, he might have to move on. Tyler Morton as well, who would reflect 100% profit against FFP. West Ham like Tyler Morton, so did Braga. Club Brugge have also looked as well. Ajax have looked at Tyler Morton. So Elliott is a player liked both in Europe and in the Premier League. West Ham, Spurs are clubs that are keen on him. Brighton have also been linked as well. Leipzig, Dortmund. But he's going to cost a premium fee, particularly off the back of the Euro, under 21 Euros, where he was the best player at the tournament. Scored loads of important goals and special goals for Lee Carsley's side as well. And the other one is Federico Chiesa. I mean, he's not going to generate a big fee for Liverpool, but it's clear that he could move. And of course, he's a forward player. So to add a few more goals in Isak, which would be an understatement, would, offloading Chiesa would probably be part of the process to facilitate in that deal, even though they play in different positions. I think, there's an appreciation that Isak is probably an exceptional market opportunity that doesn't come around often. And the problem Newcastle have is that even if they convince him to stay, it's clear that in maybe next summer there's going to be these stories again, and Liverpool could come back in at a reduced price because Isak will only have 2 years left on his contract. So I think Liverpool have again made the ultimate power play and really backed Newcastle into a corner and put that doubt into Isak's head about a move, which now looks to be a genuine possibility. Newcastle is still trying to convince him to sign a new deal. Of course, there's Saudi interest as well from Al Hilal. So it's a fluid saga, but we could definitely see some more movement in the coming days. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I'll be back again with another video discussing the transfer window very soon.